Shavua Tov. Yeah, David here just asked me what was the question I asked of Schechter. Actually, it's a topic I think we brought up in one of the past recent shiurim, where we spoke about tearing on Shabbat. I mentioned this question. I mentioned the issue here. So it's interesting to hear his answer. I'll just refresh our minds quickly. I won't go into all the details, but the chiddush that I came up with a few weeks ago was that if you have these types of tissues that one pulls the other, they pull each other as you're pulling one out, because they're connected like in three dots. They're not connected fully with even a perforated line. Rather, it's just a dot or two that connects them, and then you pull them out, and you pull out the next one as well. Can you tear one of those on Shabbat from the one after it and use it separately? So I won't go into all the details that we did a few weeks ago to explain how come, according to the halakha calculations that I came up with, that it should be permissible to do that on Shabbat. It sounds big chiddush, like a very big chiddush to allow such a thing. I haven't been able to reach Rav Free Malka yet. I'm trying to run it this afternoon for this question. But in the meantime, don't take it halacha lemaaseh. It's just a thought until I get to hear from Gdolei HaPoskim. So yesterday I approached Rav Schechter after his shir to ask him his opinion. I explained in short why I thought that should be permitted, and he agreed. He said that he recalls from a book called Binyan Olam, I think he said, a book written by an orphan who grew up in the home of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach in his younger years, and he heard a lot of halachas and Torah from Shlomo Zalman, and he wrote all that he heard in a book. And he recalls, even though it's hard for me to imagine or believe such a thing, that Shlomo Zalman allowed tearing toilet paper on Shabbat, even in the perforated line. So I said to him, but that could be deoraita. It could be korea, and even if it's not, it's at least nireke b'taken kli, because you're separating something that looks like it's all connected, looks like all one long page. You see the perforated lines, but it's still very much connected. It's much more connected than the three dots, where you can tell obviously the difference between each and every tissue. So he said, but that's what he recalls. And I said to him, even like that, with that an extra great need, you ran out of the pre-cut tissues, and now you have to use it, so you do it that way. He says, no, he remembers it's you can use toilet paper on Shabbat. I said that, can't imagine. It's hard to believe. What I know from the past is that if a person is stuck without, first of all, he should make sure that he has enough pre-cut. But if he's stuck without, then b'shinui. I said that to him. He goes, b'shinui? Why do shinui? So I said it makes it rabbinic. And it's definitely only rabbinically forbidden. And then in Mishum Kvoda Brios, we allow rabbinic prohibitions, where you don't just stop allowing doing it because for the fun of it, because you want to do it. I don't know. So he says that's what he remembers. I don't know how reliable this book is, because after all, an orphan that grew up in Shlomo Zalman's home doesn't mean that he understood everything he was being told or saw. Many times we see things that Gdolim do, and it turns out that we didn't understand the circumstances around what they did. There are famous jokes about Hasidim who followed their Rebbe, even though it was completely different intention that the Rebbe had when he did something, but they felt, oh, that's what should be done. One of the famous ones that they tell stories that a Rebbe was about to do Hanukkah lighting, Hanukkah candles, and there was a broom in the room. So I don't know why, but he felt he had to take it out of the room. So he took out the room. So ever since, the Hasidim bring a broom into the room and take it out before they do Hanukkah lighting. It's all those stupid things that are all mistakenly taken as a custom, as a minhag, as a halacha. Anyway, but at least this idea of tearing those dotted ones that are just in 3 dots connected, or 2 dots connected, we really see the obvious difference between one tissue to the next. At least that he definitely agreed that you could tear on Shabbat. He said kol sheken, if he himself thinks that he remembers that if Shlomo allowed even tearing toilet paper, kol sheken this. Okay, anyhow, that was that, but we didn't go into a very deep discussion about it. Okay, now instead of a Dvar Torah from the Parsha, well, actually, it's the Haftarah. You could still connect it to what we read yesterday. Something that's on my mind for past few days, specifically, and many years also, but became very serious these past few days. And I feel we're going in a very wrong and bad direction as a people, as a whole, as a nation. And on the other hand, there's definitely something that has to be done, because we can't go, we have to solve the issue. And it's a very complicated matter. And that is, we've been seeing in past events that this, I'm not the one to say, I'm not the only one to say this, I've heard this from many people, that unfortunately, ever since the corona began and everything since then, or not everything, but a lot of events that happened since then, tragedies, bad events, difficult, challenging events. Many times, Haredim are involved in being hit by really tragedies that are hard to fathom and to cope with. If it's the corona itself, which they were mostly hurt and hit by it, if it's the Meron disaster, if it's the Karlin disaster, if it's the Miami disaster, and I guess there were a few in between. In any case, so that's not for us to hit on the chest of our fellow friend and say, what have they done wrong that Hashem is sort of punishing them or awakening them to change their ways. That's not our mission. That's, everyone has to deal with himself and progress and perfect his ways, and not someone else and say, you did this and that, you have to change this in this way. That's not our responsibility, at least not in general. If we have a fellow friend who seeks our help and wants to understand what to do better, what to do, then fine, you can consult and you can tell them. But it's not our mission to rebuke others now and tell them what to do better and how to behave. But the final hit, this is a real blow that I don't know how to get through it, is the Minister of Treasure Minister, Lieberman, who came out end of last week with a very difficult, I would say it's Gzeira, which is almost specifically directed against the Haredi world, although it's not really only applies only to them. It's also to any other man learning Torah, that he came out with this new procedure that the state will not fund the gan, the kindergarten, the ma'on for little kids, ages 1, 2, 3, 4, those ages. The state will no longer fund families who one of the parents does not work. Only if both parents go out to work, only then will the state subsidize some of the costs, or most of the costs, for the me'onim, for these little kids kindergartens. Now that means, I heard on radio, they interviewed one of the Shas members of Knesset. That means that in average, from 800 shekel per child, which they pay now, which isn't cheap either, but that's what they pay, to 2,000 per child. It's a huge leap, huge leap. Now, don't forget, when speaking about Haredi families, we're talking about average 3-4 children of that age, between 0 to 4. They can have 3 kids. So imagine the difference. That's something we can't cope. A family can't cope with. Even a normative family, especially a Haredi family, which anyhow lives off of their from plate to mouth, is not much they save, much not much that they earn. So they take it, as far as I've heard here and there interviews, they take it as a gzera mishamayim, and they'll continue on learning Torah. Nothing's going to stop them, as they've been doing, as Am Yisrael have been doing 2,000 years and more. Ever since Matan Torah, there was always gzeros against the Jews. They take it as a, I would say, almost like a goyish gzera that comes and tries to anti-Semitic harassment that trying to hurt and pain and demolish the Jews off the face of the earth. So without going into what has to be done, what they have to be doing. It's not the point I want to raise now. But it's really painful, because if you look at it simply, we're talking about hatred, pure hatred. Doesn't make sense that in one shot, a second before to a second after, there's such a major impact, economic impact on so many people in so many families that can fall apart economically and break down with such it's after all, it's a cruel decision. It's a cruel decision. Now, I don't want to say who should we blame and who has to behave better or change their ways. I'm not going to that question. I'm going to the question of what can be done so that we save the situation, because it's going to be a vicious fight between the two camps. That hatred will be the main objective of it for both sides. And that's something very scary, and especially if it's happening during the 3 weeks. During the 3 weeks are the exact 3 difficult weeks in Jewish history, where animosity and hatred were the cause of Churban Bayit Sheni. And no matter how we explain it from both ends, why they behave this way, why they react this way, or act this way, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're getting into now, it seems like, I hope I'm wrong, but it seems like we're getting into a fight that will be vicious, that will be cruel on both sides, and who knows how it's going to end. So I was asking myself, how should we deal with this properly and try to diminish this hatred? And as always, the only answer is, the problem is it's difficult to reach even this solution, but the only solution is talking to one another, conversing, trying to understand each other. Because when you look at a certain population in general, you see if you've never spoken to either side of the camps here, never spoke to one another. You just see outwardly how they behave, and it seems like it's completely against my views, my values, my ethics, of the way I behave, the way I live my life. And I see this whole group there that's all opposite, that's all bad, that's all wrong direction, and it makes me hate them. But when you come to talk to one another, speak to one another, there's a whole long process to solve such issues of of differences of opinion. It takes a long process. Speaking to one another, understanding each other. And then I believe if they do that, if we get to that point where we're speaking to one another and understanding each other, so we can really make a change. That's what will make a change. I'm not saying everyone is klil tchelet, everyone is perfect and they're all fine and we should just continue this way. Definitely there are wrong conducts and deeds and ways of life on either side of the camp. No one's more at fault than the other. But in order to change that, it doesn't help if you trampede and force your way upon the other side. There's an expression in Hebrew, pil bechanut shel cheres, shel charsina, like an elephant walking in a clay porcelain, store of porcelain. It's going to break everything.
English is a bull in a china shop.
Thank you. Very good. Bull in a china shop. Perfect. So that's what it seems like what's going on now. It's this strength. It's to apply strength and force to force your way. And that doesn't work at any time, it's never a solution. It's never a correct solution. Yeah.
I just
say something?
Saying
okay, yes.
I wish that Mr. Lieberman did not make this suggestion.
Okay.
I wish he didn't do it. So that's how I want to start my remarks.
Okay.
Okay. But after saying that,
yes.
Nothing happens in a vacuum. The rabbi is stressing one piece of potential legislation or potential something. There's a reason to stress one thing and I look at the big picture. I feel the rabbi is not being totally as objective as he should be.
In what way to explain yourself?
Because of the Haredi participation in general society, and if you want to bring up COVID, their institutions keeping the COVID rules. There is so many institutions were open.
We're not right.
We're open.
Yeah. They wouldn't keep the rules, right?
They did not keep the rules.
Okay.
Dealing with army issues for so many years, and not weight, but the tremendous amount, as we all know, the tremendous amount of people that are registered in yeshivas that don't learn in yeshivas. There was so many.
So again, you're going into the details.
A long list.
On purpose said I wasn't going to go into the details.
He didn't do this because he woke up one morning and he had a bad sleep.
No, of course not. Of course not.
In perspective.
Of course, there's reason.
To take one thing out of content, look how fair. It's not.
No. Of course. So maybe I wasn't understood correctly. I said obviously they're both sides there to blame, and there are issues that have to be solved. But this isn't the way to solve the issue.
The Rav said hating the Haredim, no one hates Haredim. Everyone in this community and everyone that all of my friends, everyone that believes like me, they believe what Bruria told to Rav Meir. You don't hate the sinners, you hate the sins. We don't hate Haredim as individuals. We hate what they represent. We hate their lifestyle. We think it's not Torah true. It's a perversion. It's not the way it should be. There's a big difference.
I agree to that as well. But first of all, that's you.
Not Rav Meir.
That's you and your friends in this community.
Right.
But I can't say the same for a whole massive amount of chilonim who hate the people, the individuals.
And why do they hate the people?
Doesn't matter.
Okay. Well, it doesn't matter, Rabbi.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The same as the Haredim.
The definition of sinas chinam is unjustified hatred. So the Rav saying,
I agree.
The Rav saying it doesn't matter. It's no longer sinas chinam.
I agree. No, I say it like this. I'm saying like this. I'm saying I agree that there are reasons to hate. Same as the other direction as well. Haredim may hate the Chilonim for what they stand for, what they do, and that they don't believe in Hashem, and they're not following Torah mitzvos, and they're directing the whole country not to follow Torah mitzvos. And now it's even becoming worse and worse because the government now is a very, very, very anti-religious government with some of the people in there, some of the parties in there. So there is reason for hatred. I see the reasons, but it doesn't matter. Nothing can justify hatred, even not justify hatred of the deeds, of the style of life, and not the individuals themselves. The moment hatred comes into the game, we lost. We lost. No matter what you do, you lost. We have to be sure. We have to make sure that we clean ourselves. It's a big job for ourselves also, because it's easy, and we justify the fact that we hate even the deeds, not the people, because they are behaving completely opposite of what we believe in. It's easy to go in that direction, but that's not what Hashem wants of us. Especially when Rav Kook said that the sinas chinam that tore apart the Jewish people in those days, and therefore also destroyed the temple, we now have to go 180 degrees opposite. If you want to correct something, you don't just go 60 degrees, 90 degrees to the middle. You have to go to the exact opposite in order to bring it to the middle. That's Rambam, famous Rambam. If you have the midos of extreme, two extremes on two sides, you want to be in the middle. So if you're on one extreme, go all the way to the other extreme in order to average in the end. So here too, says Rav Kook, we need avas chinam. Same as there was sinas chinam, we need avas chinam in order to correct it. What does avas chinam mean? It's never, the Torah says, so always there's a reason to love our fellow Jew. So what does chinam mean? It should be ava. Instead of sinas chinam, go to ava. Says Rav Kook, no, avas chinam, meaning even in cases where you believe that the Torah doesn't ask of you to love your fellow friend, your fellow Jew, because he's behaving so terribly, so much against Torah, according to your understanding, that then you were allowed to hate this person. No, avas chinam. Apply the avas chinam. Apply ava even so. Even though you have so many good reasons to hate the person, or not the person, to hate the deeds. So I'm saying this is something we have to try to clean ourselves from in order to be able to speak to one another. Without doing that, firstly, there's no way you can speak to a person. You don't want to speak to a person if the person feels respect, feels respected, feels loved. Only then will he speak to you. Otherwise, you won't speak, and you can never get to a solution. You can never get to a compromise. You can never get to understand each other. It's a very, very important process. First of all, internally for ourselves, and then to externalize it towards others, apply it towards others. And it's difficult. But whoever said that it's easy to get to the Beis Hamikdash? It's a long, long procedure that has to be done within the Jewish people in order to be worthy of Beis Hamikdash. And this is it. We're at the very, very end of the times where we're ready for Beis Hamikdash, but we're not really ready yet until we do this process. We have to speak to one another in a way that we really are there to understand, and really to respect our fellow Jew, even if we don't agree with them. If they're able to explain, they're not bad people. I think we all believe fully that we don't. None of us feels that we're talking about bad people. We're talking about people who may have gone the wrong way, may have been mistaken in their ways. So let's understand why they do this, why they think this way, why they're acting this way. So I think that's what has to be. Yes.
I would add that what you're saying is true, but if they've got Gedolim and leaders, like you speaking about what Rav Kook says and whatever, why are we not hearing, and maybe I'm just not reading but I would see it, are we not seeing all of their Rosh Yeshivas and saying, if we are truly Dati people, religious people, like they were saying, we should be quoting this and saying, we've got to bring them, we've got to love them. That's not the rhetoric, that's not what we're hearing from the leaders of the Haredi world. So explain that to me. That's what I have the bigger problem with then. So that is, how come are the leaders, okay, if they say Gedolim and live Torah every day and learn, why are we not hearing that from all of the leaders?
Okay. Ivor just asked, and I'm just repeating the question for those who are here. That's exactly the point that brought me to discuss this issue, because of the Haftarah that we just read yesterday, Haftarah of Masei, which we missed reading the Haftarah of Rosh Chodesh, Hashemayim Kisi, because of the 3 of Puranuta, the 3 weeks that we're supposed to read rebuking Yirmiyahu, the prophet that rebuked the Jews in the time of the first destruction of the first temple. So that overrid the reading of the Haftarah of Rosh Chodesh. So within that Haftarah is the answer to what Ivor just asked. And I'll just repeat the question. Ivor asked, how come we don't hear from their leaders, Haredi leaders, or the big rabbis who lead the flock? As a shepherd, really, everyone goes after them, and whatever they say is what they do. How come we don't hear from them this concept of loving others, this concept of listening to others, this concept of discussing issues? It's mainly all that we hear is that they have all the truth with them and that they know it all, and all the rest are kofrim and going their own direction. They don't want to connect to anyone. They want to be isolated. We hear that many, many times. So I'm sorry to say, it's such a good question that the answer to it, as far as I can read from the prophets and Chazal, I'll soon quote a Chazal also regarding the question. The answer to it is that it's on one hand very wrong, as much as we can speak this way about Gdolim, and we have to be very careful. We're talking about huge Talmidei Chachamim with a lot of Torah in them, but it's not us saying it personally, it's the prophets prophesizing over this time of the end of the days of coming back to Eretz Yisrael and all that. We see that the prophets speak about this, and Chazal, but then we'll try to understand the purpose of Hashem leading them to say or to lead their people in somewhat the wrong direction, and to find out why is that being done. Why is that the process? So in the Haftarah, I'll just begin with this. We just read yesterday in Yirmiyahu, Perek Bet, Pasuk Daled through Pasuk Kafchet. So quite in the beginning, it says like this: Va'avi etchem el eretz haKarmel, I have brought you to the land of the Carmel, which is land of Israel. Le'echol piryah v'tuvah. Hashem says, I've supplied for you the fruits and the good products of this country. Vatavo, so you arrived in Israel. V'tetam'u et artzi, but you made my country impure. V'nachalati samtem le'to'ivah, you behaved terribly on my land. And then comes a pasuk that we would never believe, but it says, Yirmiyahu is saying it, not us. Yirmiyahu, the prophet Yirmiyahu, saw everything clearly. He says the following: HaKohanim lo amru hayeh Hashem. Now, Kohanim, the priests, are those that are meant to lead the people spiritually. They weren't only those who did the sacrifices in the Beis Hamikdash, which in itself is a type of spiritual leadership. They were the ones who were teaching Torah. That was one of their missions, one of the greater missions is to teach Torah. So the Kohanim, lo amru hayeh Hashem, they weren't seeking Hashem. And if it wasn't clear enough to say that, v'tofsei Torah lo yedauni. Those who teach Torah to Am Yisrael do not know me, Hashem is saying. This is very, very difficult to read because we would think the Kohanim, the Rosh Yeshivas, Tofsei Torah, those who are inclusive, who include under them many, many learners. They're Tofsei Torah. They catch the Torah. They have it all in them. They don't know Hashem. Ve'aroim, if this wasn't clear, so the final last, no, not even last, one before last, type of leadership. Haroim, the shepherds. Those who have the flock going after them. That's Dolei Ador already. We're talking about not only Rashi and Shivas. Dolei Ador. Those that everyone looks up to and follows. Pashuvi. They're acting sinfully. V'hanevim nibul babal. So we're talking about every type of leadership, spiritual leadership. And don't forget, we're talking about Beit Rishon in the days of Yirmiyahu. Beit Rishon, not Beit Sheni. Beit Sheni, we know that at least the Kohanim bought the Kohanos with money. They weren't at all on the level worthy of being Kohanim, especially not the Kohen Gadol. And each year they had to switch Kohen Gadol because he used to die in the Kodesh HaKodashim because he entered the Kodesh HaKodashim on Yom Kippur with a Taurus and he wasn't worthy of it, so perished. We're talking about Beit Rishon. Beit Rishon, they were real righteous people, seemingly. And yet here we are always talking about something that's completely opposite of being righteous people. So what's going on? And besides that, in nevuah that's not meant to teach us something for generations to come wasn't written in the Tanakh. There were hundreds of Nevi'im that weren't. What's that?
They were not recorded.
Recorded, correct, in the Tanakh, because their prophecies were for those years, that period they were living in, and that's it. It had no ramifications, no moral teachings for generations to come, so they weren't recorded. Only those who were relevant for years to come, for generations to come, only they were recorded. So if Yirmiyahu is speaking about this in his days, it means that this can repeat itself down the line of history in our days as well. And Yeshayahu speaks about this issue in a slightly different phrase, slightly different wording. He says, Mi iver, Yeshayahu membet, mi iver ki im avdi. Who is blind if it's not my servant? Now, the level of being considered avdi, Eved Hashem, is the level Moshe Rabbeinu had reached at the end of his life. The way Hashem describes Moshe Rabbeinu at the end of his life, Eved Hashem. That's what the Torah says. That being a servant of Hashem is a very, very high level. And yet, mi'iver ki avdi, says here Yeshayahu, in days to come, Hashem will blindfold. He will make blind his servants, the ones who are on top level of spirituality. They will not see the right way. They will not lead their flock, their people in the right direction. Why is all this? Why should all this be happening? You could say, okay, because they're sinners, but that doesn't make sense. To blindfold them on purpose, that Hashem should make them go in the wrong direction. Why is that? So years ago, I gave this thought, and I think the impossible answer is that, and this will answer, I think, Ivor's question as well. And we see it, by the way, happening, developing mamash these days, going in the right direction. That on purpose, Hashem wants the final redemption to be achieved, and the process should be ignited and sought after and God and requested from the laymen, from the simple people. That instead of being led, what happened when we had leaders, great leaders, Moshe Rabbeinu, Ezra Sofer, the two greatest leaders that we've ever had in Jewish history, because they're the ones that took us out of Galus twice. Once Moshe from Galus Mitzrayim, and the other is Ezra from Galus Bavel. And the Gemara says, Ra'ui Ezra shetinatan Torah al yado. Ezra was at the height of Moshe Rabbeinu almost. He could have received the Torah as well. We're talking about the two greatest leaders, taking the Jews out of Galus, and yet everything crumbled down. From Moshe's leadership, we got to the Cheta Egel and Cheta Meraglim, and then all the terrible sins all through Yoshua, Shoftim, all those years. And from Ezra, HaSofer, first of all, the mere fact that many Jews did not follow his leadership was already a tremendous sin. Only 42,000 made Aliyah then, out of millions. And then the rest of Beit Sheni was corrupt like no one can ever believe. And fighting each other within the Jewish people, fighting each other physically, killing each other, all through by a chain. So from this we learn that it's nice that we have great leaders, but that's not what makes the people better people. A great leader many times has a disconnect between him and the people because he's so great and the people aren't there. And even if the people follow him correctly, they're only following. It's not something internal from inside. They're not internalizing the truth. They're just following. It's called eder, the flock, just going after, not really understanding what the truth is and what is not truthful, what is correct, what is incorrect. They're just following. We don't want such a redemption anymore. We had enough with 2 redemptions that happened that way. The 3rd redemption, the final one that we're in now, has to include each and every individual coming to his own realization, not by leadership, not led by, rather understanding themselves, each and every individual. That's what we're waiting for in this redemption.
Is that the meaning of Aleinu?
Aleinu? In what way?
Prayer, the Aleinu prayer, the whole
Prayer.
idea. That's the concept embedded in
Aleinu? Where do you see that? And I just don't remember. I have to check the Aleinu. I never thought of it. That you would see that in Aleinu. Let me see a second. Get to yeah, well, it says here all the correct ways to believe in, but I don't see the specific. You mean the idea of v'chol b'nei v'asai yiku b'shmecha? It could be do kolish ve'tevel. Yeah, it could be that's interesting. I never thought of it. That the Aleinu is emphasizing that we want every single individual in the world, not only Jews, in the world, every single individual, recognizing Hashem as the King, the Lord of the universe. Individual, right. Very good. Very good. Very good. Excellent. Okay, terrific. So that could be, I would even put it this way, Ivor's question is so powerful that itself is the answer. We don't find in the leadership of today that they're making people understand and realize the truth. Rather, they're taking them in the wrong direction. They're making them almost like brainwashing the masses to believe that everything out there is bad, cruel, and against you, and stay closed and bottled inside, and don't respect and don't take part and don't be part of anything that's going on around. And that's totally incorrect. Now, again, I wouldn't say such a thing myself, chas v'chayil, against Dolei Ador. But if the prophets speak this way, and then Chazal, I said there's a Chazal, main one is in Sota, last page, Memchet, one of the last pages, Memchet on the bottom of Sota. The Gemara there says, Mi baz leyom ketanot. That's a pasuk, one of the Nevi'im. Mi baz leyom ketanot. Who rejected and belittled someone. So what are we talking about here? What are we talking about? That someone belittled someone else? The Gemara says, Mi bizbez shulchanam shel talmidei chachamim la'atid lavo. Why is it that la'atid lavo, again, it's speaking about the days of Mashiach, because the whole end of Sota is that famous Mishnah. Ve'ikveta de Mashiach chutz payasgei yokri yamin yamir, all those signs of the Geulah, the final redemption. Correct. All those signs that we feel them right now happening, occurring in front of our eyes. The end of the days. So, that's the famous line there. Anyhow, in that, around that Gemara, it says, Mi baz le'ontanot, mi bizbez shulchanam shetalmidei chachamim la'atid lavo. How come talmidei chachamim la'atid lavo, in the end of the days, will not be admired, will not be sought after? People won't care for their words. They will be belittled. The great Talmidei Chachamim will be belittled, will be neglected. What's the cause for this? Our answer would be, before hearing the Gemara's answer, what would we answer to that? It's the fault of the people. If you're disrespectful towards Dolei Ador, it's a terrible sin on your part, on our part, as those who we're meant to follow. What's the Gemara's answer? No, that's a different. That's a Tanat of Eliyahu, who says that what you said. That was the first beginning of the days of the Sanhedrin and all that, right? No, here's something else. Mi bizbeh katnut amana or emunah shaita bahem. Katnut emunah shaita bahem. Now, how can we understand such an answer? That the Gdolei Ador, the Talmidei Chachamim that we're supposed to follow, the reason they will not be followed, the reason people will just walk away from their guidance, is katnut emunah shaita bahem. They will have little amount of belief, of emunah. And what are we talking about? We're talking about Talmidei Chachamim. They learn day in, day out Torah. How can it be that they have a little amount of emunah? So Rav Tzvida Kook, the son of the famous Rav Yitzchak Cohen Kook, upon discussing this Gemara, he explains that emunah doesn't just mean to know by heart the Torah Kula and do all the mitzvahs and do all the halachos and believe in Hashem. Ve'aya emunat itecha chosen yishot uchmat vadat. The pasuk says that there's emunat itecha. Tzipita liyishua l'divrei neviim biyamecha. Meaning, there is a belief in Hashem that is a current belief. Not just to believe that Hashem created the world, and Hashem took us out of Egypt, and Hashem did all the miracles for us. There's emunah that's connected to reality, to the generation you live in. That's part of emunah. What? That's real emunah. That's when you see Hashem eye to eye. Ki ayin be'ayin niru b'shuv Hashem tzion. Ayin be'ayin niru means that you see eye to eye Hashem developing and being part and leading current history, the days you're living in. And what's scary about all this is that it says v'tzipita liyishua, meaning one of the three questions a person will be asked upstairs after 120 is tzipita liyishua. We think that's an easy one, right? That we all get 100 for. Because who's not looking forward for the Mashiach to come? We're all looking forward. Why should that be one of the three questions that you're asked after a whole lifetime of spending a lifetime in this world? So, that's a difficult one. We need to average it out with 100 on Tzipita Liyishua, because that means that we did business completely sincerely and with no cheating and nothing else, no stealing, cheating, and anything of that. So that's a difficult one. Torah, it's also not so simple that we spend time every day or every week for a certain amount of time to learn Torah. Okay, not so easy either. But Tzipita Liyishua, that's an easy one. That's 100 automatic. Everyone is looking forward for the Mashiach to come. That's easy. Says Rashi there, it's not so easy. Because that doesn't make sense. That should be one of the three fundamental issues that a person needs to be involved in his lifetime in order to get into Olam Haba in the world to come. Why would that be the one of the fundamental issues? Says Rashi, L'divrei neviim. Says the Ran, biyamecha. Meaning, did you realize that all the events and occurrences that happened in your life were what the prophets have spoken about as part of the Yeshua developing? Did you see that? Or did you reject what's going on? Did you walk away from it? Did you counter it? Did you go against it? If you went against and didn't participate, you don't get 100 on Tzipita Liyishua. Doesn't matter that you want Mashiach to come. That's not the real tzipita. The real tzipita is to see what's going on and feel, oh, this is Mashiach coming. This is the development that Hashem wants for. And that doesn't necessarily mean only the past 150 years since the Zionist movement began. It could have been 1,000 years ago also. those who lived back then should also be seeing, had to be seeing then back in those days, that the process that happened then was part of Tzipita Yeshua also. Even if it was far away from the Mashiach, doesn't matter. The expulsion from Spain in 1492 was also part of Tzipita Yeshua. And so is the Holocaust. And definitely good things that happened. Not too many in the past 2,000 years to the Jews, but any development has to do with Yeshua, has to do with the process continuing until Mashiach comes. And especially the past 150 years, since the beginning of the Zionist movement, whoever doesn't see this is really blind. You don't see this. What's happening now is very close to Mashiach, but this is it. We're part of it. We're within the process. And if you say beyond that, not only did I realize and notice this, did I take part in this? Was I a partner with Hashem to help develop the salvation of the Jewish people? That's Tzipita Yeshua to the utmost level. There's another midrash that says, לעתיד לבוא, בת קול יוצאת ואומרת, מי שפעל עם כל יבוא ויטול שכרו. In the days to come, there's going to be a bat kol, like a voice from heaven. It's going to say, those who helped Hashem develop the final, to reach a final destination, final redemption, come please, come forward please, you're going to get rewarded now. He's going to call upon those who helped the development of the final days, final redemption. So we're going to be called up for that. Get the reward, the award for being a part. Or we're going to stay back and not be called upon because we weren't part of it, because we rejected, because we thought this is all wrong. So the leadership, unfortunately, by the prophet saying this and Chazal repeating it over again, the emunah that all that's developing now is Hashem's ways to come to the final destination. We have to help him and not fight against it all the time. That's something that they have, that the leaders may not have in them in the final days. And therefore they won't be followed by people. People won't follow them anymore. So the answer really to Ira's question is that we, the small people, those who just lead a normal life, we should be the ones to understand all this and to make others understand this. And by the way, when I spoke about this yesterday after the Korean Minyan, before the teachings of halacha that we do, one of the men there, and I think I agree with him totally, one of the men there said, when it comes down to reality, he himself said that he was just at a meeting last week, something about real estate, he's, I guess, involved in real estate, where there was a Chiloni who was a Choser b'She'ela from being Haredi. He was once upon a time a Haredi, and he turned totally Chiloni. There were a few Haredi men in the room, and he himself with the Kippah Sruga and some others of his type. All in one room, discussing business, laughing with each other, having fun, enjoying one another, completely different than what it sounds like from the outside. And that's what's so shameful, that the media, and it's not mainly the Gedolim themselves, but their people, the people who are around the Gedolim, make it like a fight, make it like something that we can't live with each other. And it's so wrong, because when it comes down to the simple people, to those who live just normal lives, it's fun to be together with one another. And there's a lot of mutual respect. Especially if these Haredi men in the room were also in real estate, so they work the same as we do. So they look differently, they dress differently, okay, but what does it matter? we can get along with each other. That's what we need. We need more and more such meetings, such groups, such simple contact. And then we discuss things and we see that they're normal people. They're good people.
That's what Lieberman wants to be in the workforce. Exactly what he wants.
He wants, but he's doing it in a terrible way. He's doing it in a way that can never work. And he's definitely going to get the opposite. Because when you force someone, he fights back. And when you fight back, you're not even thinking. And they can get to a point where you're going to get much worse than he wants, in the opposite direction than he wants.
I know all of them hasn't kept it. Not halacha l'maaseh, but it was very cute. Everyone should show up at the mission farm and read the Rambam's opinion. That's what he said.
Lieberman?
Yeah, I thought it was.
That's very funny.
Huh? It was great. I mean, Am Yisrael hasn't accepted this halacha l'maaseh. If you read it, 100% of what he's saying.
I know, but it's funny for him to say, to teach them the Mishnah Torah. A person. No, it's not only that's. I don't admire that at all, because a person doesn't know anything and quotes one quote from a line here, a line there, without knowing the whole, all the ins and outs of what he's doing. So it's stupid.
His wife is from. His son is from.
Okay, but he's very anti.
He lives in a from
Yeshiva. Yeah. It's half-half. It's not
like he's in some tower in Ramat Aviv. He doesn't see it from.
No, but it doesn't matter. He doesn't know Torah at all, and he can't teach those who are big Torah learners how to learn the Rambam and what to take from the Rambam. That's funny, but okay. It's a nice attempt. But we have to get to the point where we're talking to one another, where we're seeing them, they're seeing us, and just normally interact normally. That will bring so much good relationship between people. By the way, the same is true with Chilonim. For some reason, it's easier for us to interact with Chilonim than it is with Charedim. Many of the times, the problem to do all of this, and that's why I'm not sure how to get this started and developed, is because they close themselves. They don't want to speak to us so much. Especially when it comes to opinions about life, about the world. They're very closed, bottled in, and we don't get the chance because they're blocking us away from them. They're isolating themselves, secluding themselves very, very strongly because they don't want any influence from outside to go creep into their world. That's what's very difficult, to break that shell and break into the wall and get somehow more in contact.
If I was a Haredi, I would be afraid. Forces fighting what I believe in is a Yetzirah. It's very powerful.
Right.
So I tell my flock, don't
exactly.
Don't go out there, because the Yetzirah is out there. He's going to grab you, and before you know, you're going to be a field.
That's the way the leaders speak there.
Right. From the Chilonim, they don't believe in Yetzirah.
Right.
Come on, go out.
Go out, speak to whoever you want.
Friendly,
right.
So that's probably that's kind of like an angle of how it comes
Exactly. But we have to understand that that's coming from their leaders, but really, mi'vel ki mavdi, and kohanim et ofsei Torah lo yidauni. Meaning we have to try to somehow has to get around it and somehow get in there and speak to the masses. And the masses don't have that horror so strong in them. It's the only more telling them that. But they themselves would wish much more to be in contact with other people and to develop more normally. They're suffering. So they always say we're suffering for the Torah. But some of them are suffering, just merely suffering because they don't have money. They can't develop in their ways. They can't live a life that they really would like to. Some of them would love to work in the outer world and to do things other than learning Torah, but they're not allowed to. They're not allowing them to. So they're suffering really, really painful to see. And by this leadership, that's unfortunately, as the prophets and Chazal say, they're not seeing eye to eye to what's going on now. So if we can somehow get around and get in there, which that I'm for now not sure how to do such a thing. But that's what we need to do. And then not only to teach them, it's not that we come there and say, here, learn from us. We're the best. We know everything. Then we're also acting the way they are now. We have to go in there and discuss mutually. Let's learn from you. Same as you can learn from us. Let's learn from one another. Let's see what we can strengthen in us that we're lacking, that you have stronger points. And we learn from us. We have stronger points. That's how it should be. You get organized with such groups of discussing matters together, that will be really, really a game changer. But it's difficult to get to that. That's where it's necessary. Yeah, yes. There's some sound in the background. Yeah, I know. David, we can't hear anything. We're just hearing boom, 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 boom. Something's wrong with your computer there. You want to write something? It's okay. Maybe write on chat. On chat, you can write, and then I can read what you wrote, and then we'll see what it is. We'd like to hear your opinion very much, everybody. Okay, so let's go halacha now. Half an hour, but this is inside. I had to get it out, so sorry it took up more time than I thought. Okay, we're in the chapter of laundering still. Laundering, very end. It should be the end of the chapter today. And by the way, before I forget, this will be our last class before Ben Azmani, because next Sunday is Tisha B'Av. Obviously, we'll not learn Hilchos Shabbos on Tisha B'Av. We're not allowed to. And then we go off for a 3-week vacation, as it's called, Ben Azmani in the Kollel. So we won't have class for 3 weeks. Then the problem is that when we're supposed to return Aleph Elul, problem is that it's in the beginning or midst of August. It's the 8th of August. Problem is that then a lot of families will be on vacation. From my point of view, we can start, but we'll have to, maybe I'll send out a message a little bit before to see if people are around, because it's the beginning of August. It's still vacation time with the kids and everything. I would think that it would take us 2 weeks to really start, and only the 22nd, Yudaled Elul, 2 weeks after the Aleph, would be the more correct time, more proper time to start. Then we would have 2 Sundays before Rosh Hashanah, so it's still a little bit of time to start off before Rosh Hashanah, and then we'll continue as normal the rest of the year. So we'll play it by ear. If we return on the 8th, August 8th or August 22nd, we'll see either this or that, or 15th, maybe the middle. Okay. So, but this is the last one before some vacation. So we'll try to finish this chapter of laundering, and then we can really begin a whole new chapter when we come back, which will be good. There's a very short chapter called Shitrei Diotot, and then a whole big topic of Muktzeh. That's going to take us through a large part of the winter, because Muktzeh is a very gigantic topic to cover, but very relevant, very frequent in every Shabbos to deal with Muktzeh. Okay, so next issue we're going to discuss in that situation is about a case where there's a sponge in the sink. A sponge was left in the sink before Shabbat. We're not allowed to use sponges on Shabbat to clean our dishes. That's squeezing. That's going to be a whole other malacha called dash. We mustn't do. It's also laundering. The squeezing itself can be considered laundering because it gets it cleaner by squeezing out all the filthy dirt and water that's inside. So we're laundering it and dash. There's 2 different malachos involved in squeezing. It depends if we want what comes out or we just want to clean what's the fabric itself. Anyhow, so what happens if there's a sponge in the sink, or sometimes there's a rag, matlit, in the sink? And by the way, you should try your best not to leave a rag or a sponge in the sink before Shabbat. Some people like it all countertop clean, and then whatever is like used for cleaning stays in the sink, so it's not visible so much to people. Looks neater that way. But then you want to wash your hands. The tila sadai, where still rinse your hands and wash dishes, and the rag or the sponge are in the sink. Now, what's wrong with that? What could be wrong? 2 points. A, shriyato zoki buso. He said many times, applying water on any fabric, just to apply water on it is cleaning it. So how can you wash your hands over a rag or a sponge? Now imagine if you're not even at home, you're a guest by someone else, and in that home where they tell you, here, this is a tilas adayim sink, there's a sponge in the sink. What do? So that's 1 point of laundering, of cleaning the actual rag or sponge. B, there's a concept called shema ischat, which means normally we don't want wet rags or wet sponges when they're soaking wet. So what do we do normally? We squeeze them in order to make them drier. You take the rag and twist it until we squeeze out all the water we can. So on Shabbat, Chazal were concerned that a person by mistake may squeeze the rag or the sponge during an Issa D'Oraita. So it's a Gzeira. You mustn't apply water besides the laundering of the water itself, cleaning the rag. Besides that, you may then squeeze it. Maybe if you're by someone else's, invited to someone else, you don't touch their rags or sponges. You wouldn't do that. Maybe it's, actually I'm just thinking of it now, is there such a gzeira when it's not your home at all? It's interesting to find out. I haven't seen anyone in the meantime, the books I've read, discussing, asking this question of whether it's true by someone else's home. But if you're the landlord, if you're the owner of the place, and you see it all soaking wet, sometimes it bothers you and you go and squeeze it. You can't do that on Shabbat. So, by laundering, the issue of laundering, it depends really. If it's a clean sponge or a clean rag, because you've used it once, twice, 3 times, but it's still quite clean. So we said applying water onto a clean garment, clean clothes, is a machlok, a dispute whether that's kibbutz or not. And we said the Shulchan Aruch goes more in the direction that it's allowed, and the Ramah and the Mishnah Berurah in the direction that it isn't. So for Sfardim, if it's a clean sponge, then the applying water itself would not be an issue. Even though Rav Yosef says, but that's only like chumrah, extra stringent. But for Ashkenazim, it's even a problem to apply water on a clean sponge. Even if it's totally clean, you mustn't apply water. So what do we do in this case? The best is to rinse your hands or wash or do until time in a different sink that has no rags or sponges in it. That's the best. If you can't find one, or if your host tells you this is where we do our washing until it's a dime, you can't help it. You can't just ask for a different sink. Even though if it's a real problem, it's a problem of halacha, then you do have to ask for a different sink. Sorry, I can't wash in this sink, and I wash somewhere else. How much embarrassing that can be, but you don't want to do an isser. You have to do it gently, but you don't want to do something totally wrong.
You put a dish on the towel, so any water that gets under the dish and gets into the towel is sick ratio. But in putting water on the dish, it's not a problem.
Okay, that's a nice idea. Okay, so even without a dish, you came to a very important concept, psik reisha. What does psik reisha mean? Until now, we've spoken about cases where a person applies water on purpose to clean the garment. Here, he's washing his hands. The person is just washing his hands. For all he cares, he doesn't want any drop of water on the rag or sponge. It just has to happen. Psik reisha, that would happen because he's washing his hands over the sink, and there's no way that, unless he's very, very, very careful to wash over the hole, over the sewage hole, that the water goes just into the pipes and doesn't go around the sink. He could be very, very gently and carefully that it goes only into the hole and doesn't spread around. You could try that. But normally it's psik reisha. It would have to touch, some of the water would have to touch the sponge. Now, psik reisha could take us to a lower level of an issue. Depends if it's psik reisha de nichale or psik reisha de lo nichale. Oh, it depends. If you're in a different person's home, so it's lo nichale. You don't care less if you're cleaning the rag or not. It's not yours. So that's clearly psik reisha de lo nichale. You're not interested in the water touching. It just has to happen, but you're not interested in it, which lowers it to a derabbanan level. That's already rabbinic. Psik reisha de lo nichale is rabbinic forbidden. Even there's an opinion of the Aruch, who was one of the Geonim in the Geonim period, the Aruch. He holds that it's mutar, right? It's allowed. Even psik reisha is allowed on Shabbat. We don't pass it. We don't follow him halacha, but there's something to rely on if it's a very shatat chak situation. Now, but sometimes in your own home, it could be psik reisha de nichale. Because let's say if the rag is dirty, and that's the worst situation, that's kibus deoraita, according to all opinions. To apply water on a dirty garment, that's deoraita, dirty material. So sometimes if it's your own home, you're fine with it. You're good with it that it gets wet now. It gets because actually gets cleaner. And if you see dirt, filth on it, so you're pleased that it's getting cleaner. It's not your original intent. You're not pouring water over it directly. You're washing your hands, but you're happy with the fact that the water also goes on the sponge and cleans it. So that's psik reisha de nichale. Nichale is definitely the right. No question. It remains the same level according to all posts. So it would depend if you're interested or not in the water going on it. That's the definition here. But in any case, even if you're not interested, it's lo nichale, it's still rabbinically forbidden. So how do we get around the rabbinic prohibition here? Here we could use this. Then really. Yeah, usually the lo nichale would be when do we don't care at all? We don't care for it and we don't want it even to happen that it gets wet. When it's clean, the cleaner it is, the less we would like the water to get absorbed in it, because then it just gets ichier, filthier than a clean rag or dry clean rag. So the more clean it is, the more lo nichale, right? The more I don't want the water to go on it. The moment it's clean, so we said that the Sephardim don't have a problem at all. The Ashkenazim have a problem, because even on a clean rag, we shouldn't be applying water. But if we're not applying water directly on it intentionally, we're doing a psik reisha, and it's psik reisha de lo nichale. So now, psik reisha lo nichale, for a clean garment, that's allowed. That you can be making. Because for a clean garment, there's altogether the opinion that says that there's no kibus to begin with. There's no laundering to begin with. And now that we take the stringent opinion and we say there is, but that's only true if we're interested in it to get wet. But if we're not interested, so it's it's already rabbinic. And to be a rabbinic suffix, it's like suffix de rabbanan, because it's not sure that there's a problem with soaking water, with applying water onto a clean garment. It's a suffix de rabbanan lekula. That's how it works here. So this all works for a clean sponge or clean rag, that even the Ashkenazim can wash their hands over it and not care for the water to go on it. But if it's a dirty rag or a dirty sponge, and even the Sephardim and definitely the Ashkenazim have a problem here. Because then it's, even if psik reisha de lo nichale, even if you would say, let's say you invite it over to someone else and you see they have a dirty rag in there, and you don't care at all if it's cleaned or not. But it's one rabbinic prohibition, not suffix de rabbanan lekula. It's a rabbinic prohibition. And if it's in your own home, it could be deoraita, because you get a kick out of it. You're enjoying it, that the water goes on the dirty rag and cleans it out. Oh, so you need to move it away. You need to move it away from the sink, correct. That's the solution. And that's done. Why do we say with the shinui? Why do you say with the shinui? Because you're right, because of muktzeh. The rag itself, the sponge itself is muktzeh, no purpose to use it on Shabbat. Now, what type of muktzeh is it? Machmas gufo, machmas kish marach leisur, chesron kis, Basis of Asur, we have all different categories of muktzeh. It's not Chesron Kis for sure, right? It's inexpensive and you don't care that people toss it around and throw it around. That's not Chesron Kis at all. It's not a basis of Asur at all because it's just in itself muktzeh. So it's either Mahmas Gufo or Kishot Isu. Mahmas Gufo means that there is no purpose in this artifact. It's useless. Here it's not useless. Here you use it for cleaning. So it goes down to Kli Shemelachto Isu. That's what the rag is, or the sponge. The Kli Shemelachto Isu. It's a Kli, it's a utensil that's used for a prohibited action. You can't use a sponge or a rag on Shabbat. So Kishot Isu, that's bothering you to do something because of its location, that's called Litzorach Gufo o Mekomo. That the place it's in, the location it's in, is bothersome to you. So here, you're allowed to lift it up with your own hands. You don't need shinui. You pick it up and put it aside. Because where it is now is bothering you. You can't use the sink because of it there inside the sink. You can pick it up and put it aside, put it somewhere else, and then wash your hands over the sink. Unless, only one case you cannot pick it up. And sometimes that's the situation where it's already soaking wet. If you have a soaking wet sponge or rag and you want to lift it up, first of all, the place where you're catching it, holding it, you could also squeeze by mistake. You're holding it tightly because you want to pick it up, so you can maybe be squeezing the water out of it, which in itself is sochet, which in itself is a laundering. But besides that, doesn't matter. You're doing the action itself. That's true if you're doing some other thing and it gets done. Then you speak about here you're squeezing that's the action itself you're doing. And if you want to call it, no, I'm just picking it up, I'm not squeezing it, call it picking it up, but it's psik reisha because it's soaking wet. So it has to be. Oh, exactly. So we'll get to that in a second. But beforehand, if it's soaking wet, you have two issues. A is the place where you're squeezing it in order to lift it up. B, shema ischat, rabbinically forbidden, because if it's soaking wet and you're picking it up, you may by mistake forget and squeeze it out because that's what you normally would do. So there are two problems picking it up.
That can't be a problem because that wouldn't fall into your thought process because you're moving it for other reasons.
Right, to get out of your way.
For other reasons, and I'm going to do this issue with it.
I get it. You know where your svara is very good because your svara comes up in chametz. It says if a person finds chametz on Pesach, not talking about Yom Tov, let's talk about Chol HaMoed. It doesn't matter. Actually, Yom Tov also. Yom Tov we just say kofer avet hakli. You just bring something to cover it. On a Chol HaMoed, you have to burn it or at least throw it down flush it down the toilet. So the poskim say, how can you get it to the fire? Or how can you get it to the toilet? The moment you pick it up, there's a chashash shem yavo leochlo. Chazal say, why do we get rid of every single crumb of chametz before Pesach? Because you may come and eat during Pesach because you forget that it's Pesach because you're very used to, it's very common to eat a biscuit or a wafer. You may by mistake eat it. Although who can ever believe that some religious Jew would eat a piece of chametz on Pesach? But some forget for a second and they may eat it. So how can you lift it up and get it to the toilet, to flush it down the toilet? If on the way you're holding chametz in your hand, you may eat it by mistake. So the answer is what David just said now. The answer is, I did the tarud levaro lo yavo leochlo. Because his whole intent now is to get rid of it, flush it down the toilet. He's all bubbled up and going crazy to get rid of it. Why would he come and eat it? His whole intention is the exact opposite, to get rid of it. So then we're not afraid that he may eat it. So you're saying the same here too. You're trying to get rid of the rag because of laundering, because of not wanting to do logically the wrong thing logically. So you're not going to do the wrong thing intentionally. So I get your point. It's a very good point. Very good point. I haven't seen it mentioned either. That idea, but David Weiss's idea here was very good. If you lift it up with a spoon, which is not squeezing in any way, and the mere fact that you're doing it b'shinui, same as David Levine said before, you lift it up with shinui, but not because of it being muktzeh, rather to remind you that you shouldn't be squeezing it. Otherwise, why are you lifting it up with a spoon? That's a reminder not to squeeze it. That's even more powerful. So that's the correct answer. If it's soaking wet, lift it up with a spoon. If it's quite dry, just pick it up with your own hands. Because then there's no question of squeezing, not for the mere fact of holding it and not for wanting to squeeze it out because it's quite dry. If it's only damp or dry, that's okay to pick it up with your own hand. Because it's
Can I ask a
you need the place, the location where it's in. It's bothering you to use that location. Yes, Danny.
That's a question. So let's say there's another solution potentially. The sponges that we have during the week. I mean, I obviously don't use them on Shabbat, but
right.
They're sewn. There's a seam on the top and bottom end, which is just sewn. You can lift it by that without squeezing anything. Okay. And there's no, and clearly because you're holding in such a weird way, that's a strong reminder that you're not supposed to do anything. But leaving that aside. Now let's say it's pretty soaked, right? So I'm going to lift it up by that way, or even with the spoon, but whatever. I'm going to lift it up.
Okay.
Now, when I put it down, its own weight is going to make itself leak out some fluid. Right. So that's sort of like, it's not like a grumma slita, so it doesn't matter because of my intention and it's a grumma. Or even more so. Wait, one more so. What if I say, I don't, if I pick this up and take it across, it's going to drip everywhere. I don't want to do that. So maybe for now, I'm going to lift it up and just lean it against the side of the sink. The water will drain out. Now there I'm doing it purposely, but the water will drain out on its own. I'm just lifting it on an angle, but I know because the gravity is going to drain out. So is that slita? Is that prohibited? Or also I'm just tilting it to the side and it does what it does.
No, interesting. But first, before the option of tilting it, of leaning it to the side, the first option where you said you lay it somewhere,
right? Why
would that, even gravity-wise, why would that make it drip more so than it would anyhow in the sink? It's the same way.
It depends how if it was laying flat on its back, so to speak, on a sink.
Yeah.
So whatever water can drain has drained, right? There's going to be some remaining. Now, when you flip it, it's going to.
Then you get the water out from the other side. Wow. Okay. The only Gemara I can remember right now, that reminds me of your question, is Gemara in the beginning of Beitza. The beginning of Masechet Beitza, the Gemara discusses. Hi, nice to see your face. The Gemara discusses. Mashkim shezavu me'elehen. That's exactly your point. Mashkim shezavu me'elehen is the fact that from fruits that on its own juice came out because I guess they're beginning to rot. Then it becomes very, very liquidy, fluidy, and it comes out. So the Gemara there says that you mustn't use them. They're like muktzeh because if we allow you to use mashkin zavu me'elein, if you allow you to drink the juice that comes out, you may go and squeeze the orange or whatever it is, whatever fruit it is that comes out. Shema yischat. So those mashkim are muktzeh. That's how the Gemara explains the muktzeh of beitza, of the egg that was hatched, because it looks like mashkin shezavu me'elein. It looks like juice coming out of a fruit on its own, because here it's a egg that got hatched from the hen on its own. It's like something there looks alike, even though it's very hard to, very, very unlikely that a person would say, if I can touch an egg, move an egg, then I'm also allowed to move and touch the juice that comes out of a fruit on its own. And if he does that, he may squeeze the fruit itself. That's the circle we close to explain why the beitza that was hatched on Shabbos is muktzeh. Very, very far-fetched. But that's one of the explanations of Yosef, I think he says it. But we don't find that it's considered squeezing. It's considered muktzeh when it comes out on its own, because we're concerned that if we use that water that came out, or just came out, we may squeeze. But it's not that we're in trouble for the mere fact that it's coming out. That I don't think is considered schita. Schita is the action of squeezing, not that it comes out automatically. That's what I think. From there, we can derive that it's just muktzeh, but it's not a problematic action. So that would be okay. Now, tilting it on the side, from the point of view that it drips out, that's still okay. But from the point of view, I know, I'm thinking of something else now, of the dripping out. Could be that it's not squeezing, not considered squeezing, but it could be a problem with borer. Because by you changing the angle, the way it's standing, then you're causing the water to come out, and it's coming from within something that's absorbed in. So it's like a little bit of a borer type thing. You're separating between the water and the sponge in a way that could be like, that's like a tea bag. When you lift up a tea bag, so if you let it drip, that's borer. Because the water is coming out between the leaves. It was combined in the leaves before, and now you're letting it drip out through the bag, the tea bag, which is like a net. So it's like allowing it to separate between the leaves and the water. So that's borer b'kli. It would be the right level of borer. So how do you take out a tea bag from your cup? You have to quickly. In a spoon is also good, right? Because they're not allowing the water to come out, right? But if you want to just pull it by the string, so do it quickly. Don't allow the water to drip. Don't hold it over the cup. Allow it to drip, and then take it out. Just take it out quickly and throw it in the garbage. Even though on the way water may come out, but you're showing you have no interest whatsoever in that water. If you're holding it over the cup, it shows you want that water to come out and use it. Here, you have no interest. So maybe that's the answer for the sponge, why it may not be borer. Because you have no interest in the water. You're not at all intending for it to separate one from the other. It's like the tea bag where you quickly throw it out. So even though water does come out on the way, it drips a drop here, a drop there, but you're not interested in it, so it's not considered borer. So that could be the answer. So that's okay. To tilt it on the side is okay. Both from the point of view of squeezing and borer, it shouldn't be a problem. But then I'm not sure, you have to be very acrobatic to put it in on an angle that it shouldn't slip back into the sink. And,
well, if you have a grate in the bottom of the sink, if there's a grate, you can sort of, it'll rest against that.
So stick it. Okay.
You lean against the side and it'll, whatever. I mean, it's doable. Assuming it's doable. If it's not doable, it doesn't matter. Then it's irrelevant. But assuming it's doable.
Right. So that should be okay. Right. That's a good answer. That's a good way. Then you're careful when you wash, not to wash over it. You have to wash on the other side of the sink to make sure the water doesn't go there.
Right.
Okay. Right. It's mutar.
It's mutar.
Right. No, mutar. But you know what kaven means? That it doesn't have to occur. It's a 50-70% chance, but not 100%. Right. Exactly. Psikresha is mode, and it's asur. And we're doing psikresha in this case, because when you wash your hands normally, and there's a sponge in the sink, psikresha, the water will go on it. That's why it doesn't help. They're not with kaven. Doesn't help.
Wash it away. If you don't pour the water on top of it, you wash it away from it. Very little of the water will touch it. Very little of the water will touch it. Yes, of course, it's a psikresha. You do it on top. You have a whole sink here. So you wash your hands to the side of it. It's not a psikresha.
Okay.
It's only skaven.
You have to wash on the side, the other side, and gently, because the moment you pour a lot of water quickly, it streams directly to it. It will definitely touch it. And do it very slowly, slowly on the other side of the sink. Right? That's doable. That's doable also. That's true. So I would say like this: the best option is to use the spoon trick. Take it out with the spoon, and then have no problem. Sochet, you're not holding on to it tightly, it will squeeze that water. You're not going to go and squeeze it because you take it with the spoon. So it reminds you that you're not, that's the whole point, not to squeeze it. And you're not dealing with muktzeh issue if had it been a problem with muktzeh. The second to best would be what Dr. Weiss suggested, that you lean it against the wall, against the side of the sink, so that most of the sink is vacant of it and empty, and then you can wash your hands normally. And the third option is that David Levine just said, that you can wash gently on the other side of the sink, so that it's davar shenamit kaven. If it somehow water gets to it, it's not at all your intent, and it didn't have to happen, so it's obsecration, and it's allowed. So those are the three options from best to worst, but that's what you can do in these cases. I would use a third option in cases where you're invited somewhere and you can't start rearranging the sink for them. Ask for a spoon, get it out, put it somewhere else. You're not going to be invited again to that house. It's first and last time. Or ask for a different sink, yeah. These are things that we try to avoid because we don't want to offend anyone. So then I would use that option to gently pour the water over my hands in a way that isn't necessarily going to touch the sponge, and then it's obsecration, and it's the Meshach Kaven, and then it's allowed. Sure. No, not my machronim. No. You have to get your whole hand wet. But if you do it slowly, then it goes straight into the drain and doesn't spread around the sink. That's the idea. Try to get it straight over there. It'll still look awkward to your host, but you can't help it. You can't just do everything freely just because you're going to offend the host. You have to do as best as possible to do it halachically and yet not to offend anyone. Balance the two. Okay. This we've done. I want to touch one or two more topics so we finish the chapter. There's not much to go. Folding talis and clothes. We've done that. We spoke about that, right? Not to do it on the lines, to do it the other way around. Those who do it on the lines, also not terrible. Let's see. This is something very important. When you have, for some reason, wet clothes, let's say if by mistake someone spilled some water or other liquids on you, wet clothes, or you've come back on a winter day and you're soaking wet from the rain, any type of situation there's wet clothes, and you want to hang it, you want to change your clothes, and you want to hang it, you mustn't hang it, because hanging wet clothes would seem marisayin. People will think you did laundry on Shabbat. When do we hang wet clothes?
It's raining outside. Why would they think you did laundry if it's pouring rain outside? Come on.
Yeah. In the bathroom.
Even then, chadrei chadarim, right? Even chadrei chadarim. Anything that's maritain, you can't even do in a closed room.
I won't say that, but I'll say everyone knows it's pouring outside.
Everyone knows it's pouring.
Why would anyone think that? There's no havamina.
First of all, there's what you're right. First of all, you're right. But there's what we call lo plug. Lo plug means we don't go into specific situations and differentiate this day. What happens if it's a rainy day, but exactly the hour that someone sees their clothes hanging, it's not raining there. And he hadn't seen, he wasn't awake when it was raining. He didn't even know it was raining before. So now they'll think you did your laundry. You can't go into every specific situation.
Today I'm invited to your house, Rabbi. You're invited to my house, Rabbi. I give you my word. You won't think I did laundry. I won't think that you did. What should I tell you, Rabbi? I don't think so. Maybe I'm being down the chazchut. I don't know.
No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Chazal have a gzera. Marisayin is complete for everyone.
There's no time to it.
Rabbi Nasi never did his laundry on Shabbat. Believe me.
Yeah, but maybe the person you invited to your house isn't so knowledgeable and they just see what you're doing.
It's raining outside.
No, I know, but they.
Yeah,
no, you're right.
I agree. The specific case is right. Right, it's correct. But lo plug. We don't go into specific situations, say this yes, this not. And I think it's very logical to do that, because when you start going to specifics, so what would happen if it just, like I said before, rained an hour ago and the guy wasn't awake even when it wasn't raining, and now he sees something hanging, and now it's cloudy, but it's not raining. How would he understand that it was raining before? That's why the clothes is hanging. All kinds of specifics, tiny details. So we don't go into all that. We say, lo plug, we doesn't hang any wet clothes. In the bathroom, behind closed doors, it doesn't matter. So what can we do? We can do it in a very unneat way. How do we normally hang our clothes when we really did our laundry? We do it neatly. We hang it over the rope, over the string, nicely spread it out because we want to get it dry. So it's very, if it's folded and crowded, it doesn't get dry that way. So if we do it dafka, folded, crowded, and we just throw it over something without neatly hanging it, that's allowed. That's the way to do it. Just take your soaking wet coat or soaking wet sweater or jacket, whatever it is, and just toss it over a chair or toss it over a banister or whatever you want. Not dafka, don't use the rope that's normally used for hanging laundry. That's dafka the worst place to put it. Because that's really a case where someone would say, you did the laundry in Shabbat. So just throw it over something in a way that shows that you haven't done your laundry, because that's not your normal way to hang things, and it's okay. That's the way to do it. Yeah.
For Shabbos, my guests, we went swimming. I was giving swimming lessons.
Okay.
So they had their wet towels. So they wanted to hang up their wet towel. In the backyard, they have, the thing where you...
Right.
The
racks.
Right.
Yeah.
So on Shabbos, they wanted to bring the towels in. So it's that. In other words, it looks like the end of the washing process is where you bring in the laundry and you fold it.
Right.
So it doesn't look like you're washing, but it looks like it's part of the process of washing. So
and you have begun on Shabbat the whole process. That's the question. So we don't find a problem, Marisain, bringing back indoors the dry, because then everyone would say to themselves, there I can use David's idea. You've done your laundry on Friday or Thursday, and now it's all dry. Why would I think that you did the laundry on Shabbat when you just bring in dry clothes? So that's a very easy way out. So that's okay. But there's an issue. If Bein Hashmashos, the time between Shkia and Seis HaKochavim, the 18-20 minutes of Bein Hashmashos, if the laundry was still wet, then it's a muktzeh item. And it's muktzeh. Even though Shlomo Zalman did not understand this halacha, there's a very, very powerful question yet against it, but that's halacha. We can't touch for the entire Shabbat. It's called the Milut Katzai Ben Hashmashos Kuli Yoma. If it was a muktzeh Ben Hashmashos time, it's muktzeh the whole Shabbat. So, but if it was dry already before Shabbat and it just was left on the racks or on the rope, just because we didn't have time to bring it in and fold it up, then we can bring it in on Shabbat. Folding is another issue, not because of gihutz that you're making the creases, that's not an issue for towels, but because of hachana. Why would you need to fold on Shabbat? It's not for Shabbat, it's for the weekday. You want everything set in the right place. So if you hate the mess, or your wife can't take the mess, then it's considered for Shabbat. You want an onyx Shabbos, you want a nice Shabbos, pleasant Shabbos. But if it's really just for the weekday, you don't care less that it's in your bedroom somewhere or throw it into a closet and close the door. If that doesn't bother you, then don't fold. But if that even bothers you or your wife, to even know even the knowledge that there's some unfolded laundry in the closet, then they can even fold it, because then it's for Shabbat's sake to have pleasure on Shabbat.
Isn't it correct that there's no hasra for Talmud Chacham?
There's no what?
Hasra for Talmud Chacham.
Shogeg umezid, lehavchim and shogeg umezid, right?
So
that's Rabbi Yossi's opinion in Makos. Yeah.
Based upon that logic, there should be also no more sign.
The Talmid Chacham knows what he's doing.
Correct.
But you see, Dafka in that case. Okay, but Dafka in your case proves the exact opposite. What does it mean, Eina Torah Talmid Chacham? What is he about to do? He's about to do a sinful action.
He knows it. That's why you don't do homework.
Meaning, he's about to do a sinful action, and to make him amazing, you don't need to do a tra. You don't need to warn him because he knows it. But he's about to do a sinful act. You assume that every act he does is an amazing act, right? That's what it means. Eina Torah Talmid Chacham. You don't need to make it from shogeg to amazing just by warning him, because he knows it himself. So anything he does is amazing. It's the exact opposite. It's not the benefit of the doubt and that he's doing the right thing. It's the exact opposite. We're sure he's doing the wrong thing because he knows it's wrong and he's doing it anyhow. That's Eina Torah Talmid Chacham.
We know he's knowledgeable.
Right.
So because you know he's knowledgeable,
So you know it's amazing. It's intended to do bad, and not that he didn't know. By a regular person, we assume it's shogeg, unless you warn him. Unless you tell him, no, this is not permitted to do. You're just about to do something non-permissible because it's this and this sin, and he does it anyhow. Only then it's amazing. Right? I mean, it's always amazing. So we see Dafka the opposite, that we don't assume that because of him knowing it, then he's not doing the wrong thing. The opposite. Because of him knowing it, he's doing it amazing. So unfortunately, Talmid Chachams aren't clean of sins. So we can't assume anything. And again, we have this whole issue of lo plug, and we make rules and we go by the rules. Otherwise, we start, how big of a Talmid Chacham we have to be in order to assume that he knew the halacha not to do it, and he must have not done it. We can never really work that way. Okay. By the way, the racks themselves, if let's say they were left in the house before Shabbat, and it's uncomfortable, it's not nice to see in the middle of the living room or in the middle of the bedroom, the racks. You want to take them outdoors. Nothing to do with the laundry itself. Just take them outdoors as is. They're empty even. Are you allowed to on Shabbat? So from the point of view of muktzeh, you would be allowed to. Because what type of muktzeh is this? Again, kli shemirachto isu. It's a utensil. It's usable. But it's used for non-permissible actions, for hanging laundry on it. Which is, we just said now, we're not allowed to. So it's a kli isu. It's like a hammer. It's like a pen. It's like all those non-permissible muktzeh objects. So that the tzorach gufo mekomo is allowed. If it's bothering you, the location is bothering you, you can't walk by it, or it's bothering you see it, it makes you uncomfortable during Shabbat, then you can move it out. That's the point of view muktzeh. But there's another issue here. The maritayin of laundering. If someone sees you take this out doors,
they don't know what the clothes are.
What are you going to do now? Right. Now, if it's empty, what would then be?
You don't put clothes on. You just bring the rack out.
Right. Just an empty rack out. I'm trying to see if he mentions that. No, he mentions the only case in Gadim Shalav. He's talking about the case where there are clothes on it, all dry. But as he said, no one knows what status the clothes is in. Maybe they're wet. And then they would think you just did your laundry, you hung it on the racks and you brought it out to the sun to get it dry. So that's why you're tying definitely. The question is if it's an empty rack. If it's an empty rack, you're allowed to take it out. Because it's Tzorach Mekomo. And there's no point, no question in why should a person think you're bringing it out in order to hang clothes on it? That's too far-fetched already. Right? So that we don't have to care about. That's not Maritayin. So if there are clothes on it, you mustn't take it out because of Maritayin of laundering. But if it's empty, you're allowed to take it out. Unless it's raining.
But you couldn't take it out because then it would get wet.
Right.
Now you're really laundry.
Right. I think you're doing laundry, right? Okay. That's that. Whoosh. Yeah. Two more very, very, very quick points. Does kavod habrios, meaning the fact that you're embarrassed, so you go out with a stain, let's say, on your clothes. You have a stain. You're somewhere where you can't change your shirt or pants. You're somewhere vacationing, and now you have the stain on your clothes. Does kavod habrios allow you to do anything? What can you do in order not to feel embarrassed, ashamed of what you have, and yet not transgress halacha on Shabbat? The Rabbanan you're allowed to, exactly. If you bring it down to rabbinic prohibition, you're allowed to deal with, you're allowed to transgress rabbinic prohibition or not to be embarrassed in front of others in public.
Can you deal with it with machinery in the sense of instead of brushing it with your hand,
right?
Do it, rub against the wall.
Oh, so that's what we're going to discuss now. First of all, applying water on it is considered d'oraita, no way. That's d'oraita. Laundering on Shabbat, you cannot in any way, even if you're embarrassed, doesn't help. Applying water is d'oraita. Rabbinically forbidden is even by using the dry material itself of your clothes and rubbing it one against the other to get rid of most of the schmutz, most of the dirt. That's rabbinically forbidden, and that you can do with kavod habrios. If you're so embarrassed to come out this way to the dining room or to the shul or whatever, then you can do a rabbinic transgression, which is like rubbing dry substance one against the other. So this you can do, and usually it's not going to get rid of the stain totally because the absorbed part of the stain won't go away. Only the stuff that's on top, that's external, is rubbing away, which is anyway barely laundering, because we said laundering is only stuff that gets absorbed in the garment that you take away. Anything that's on surface is considered laundering to begin with. So that's definitely allowed to rub against each other, even though it's rabbinically forbidden normally, but here it's Kovod Abrios, allows you to do so. Now, Bishinui, Bishinui is another way he mentions here. You can't make it Bishinui. It also brings it down to rabbinic level by doing Bishinui. And then for Korabir, you're allowed to rub yourself against the wall. When you have some dust, we said can be a Doraita level prohibition by Rashi and by the Ramah. Holding like Rashi is the Doraita level to take away the dust. But if you do Bishinui, then it's rabbinic, and Korabrios allows you to do so. Right, that's another option. But listen to this now. What happens if a person is at home now when he notices the stain? And he can take it away by rubbing dry or rubbing himself against the wall or the shinui, all those ways that are forbidden, and Mishuk Kvar Brios we allow it. But he's at home now. What type of embarrassment does he have? He's at home, no one sees. Oh, so now you're going to say, wait, but he wants to go to shul. Daven in a minyan. He doesn't have it. He's in a hotel room. He's in the room. He hasn't brought an extra shirt to change, which is the first mistake already. He should always have an extra shirt to change. But he didn't bring one along. He doesn't have another shirt. And now he would like to go to shul. And it's Kvod Brios if he goes out with such a stain, he wants to get it out in a way that's rabbinically forbidden. The answer to this is stay in your room and don't do this for Kvod Brios. Why is that? Because even for a mitzvah purpose, we don't transgress any isser. So if right now, even rabbinic, if right now there's no Kvod Brios involved because he's in the room, so he wants to do a rabbinic prohibition now, to transgress a rabbinic prohibition in order to go to a mitzvah. That's not allowed, because even for a mitzvah, you can't transgress a mitzvah d'Rowan. Now, you can't say that right now he has Kvod Brios because staying at home he has no Kvod Brios. So he's putting himself into a situation of Kvod Brios. That's not allowed. So the final halacha is, even if נמצא בביתו ולא בין הבריות, אסור לנקות את הבגד, הגם שמחמת כן יצטרך להישאר כל השבת בבית ולהתפלל ביחידוס, כיוון שלא יתירו איסור דרבנן כדי לקיים מצווה. כמובן בשולחן ערוך סימן תקפ"ו סעיף כ"א. שולחן ערוך straight, he doesn't speak about this specific case, but he says straightforward, even for a mitzvah purpose, you don't transgress a rabbinic prohibition, even a rabbinic prohibition. And it's right now not for the brios, so why put yourself into a Kvod Brios situation? That's an amazing halacha. You stay at home, you stay in the hotel room, if you're so embarrassed. If you say to yourself, okay, so I'll go out with this thing, and then you go out, okay, then you go daven. That's what I would do, because I would say people will understand that it's a holy stain, it's a Shabbos stain, I can't get it out. And that's, well, what can I do? I'll go daven this way. But if you feel so ashamed, so embarrassed, you don't want to go out that way, so stay home. Stay in the room. Even to go eat in the dining room, you can't go there if you're so embarrassed. You stay in the room. Okay. And the very last point is cleaning glass lenses on Shabbat. So those are, of course, don't absorb anything. So you're allowed to clean them with dry.
Contact lens or eyeglass?
So there's, first I'm talking about the eyeglasses themselves, like these lenses right here. Yeah. So if you want to use the material cloth, there's a cloth that you can clean it out with, no problem. You can use it on Shabbat because nothing gets absorbed in the glass, in the lens itself. It doesn't get absorbed. It's all external. So whatever you clean away is fine. Because he said only things that are absorbed in the material, those are considered laundering. Otherwise, it's allowed. So you can use any cloth, any material to clean your lenses. But there's some that have they have the spray. You spray over the lens in order to make it really shiny. Makes it like very speckless, clean, and completely cleaned out totally. That you should not do.
Got alcohol, it gets things that are like grease, which
grease, right? Like oil type things, oily stuff, right? So that you cannot use on Shabbat, not because it gets out anything absorbed, because it's really not absorbed. Even the grease and oil isn't absorbed in the lens. It's a plastic, doesn't absorb anything. But because it says specifically that havraka is not allowed, shining things is not allowed on Shabbat. So they consider polishing, right? Polishing is not allowed, even if it's not getting any dirt out. The mere fact that it's polished clean, that's a problem in Shabbat. So you mustn't do it with the spray, only with the dry material you can clean your lenses. Contact lenses, I think we mentioned at the very, very beginning of the chapter, but we'll review again. Contact lenses, the ones that are soft, the soft kind of lenses, they do absorb the oil stuff, the greasy stuff on our eye does get absorbed into the lens itself in the soft lenses. The hard ones are like the eyeglasses. Those you can clean. But again, by cleaning them with a solution, that could be like polishing them, which is a problem even with the hard ones. But the soft ones definitely is a problem of laundering, because you're getting out the absorbed dirt from within the lens. So you cannot soak it in a solution. You can only use saline. That's salt water. Salt water you can use, because that doesn't get the absorbed stuff out. It only keeps it moist, so it shouldn't dry out and ruin the lens itself. Just to keep it moist is okay, but not to clean it with a solution. That's what we need to do for contact lenses. Okay, so we finished the chapter. Hashem, next after the vacation, I'll send out an email when exactly we'll resume our learning, and then we'll continue with a whole new chapter. Okay, take care. Shavua tov. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Gladly.